All right, welcome back. The next topic in our series of responding to Muslim objections to Christianity and the Bible is the Trinity. Let's talk about the Trinity, the doctrine that there is one God who eternally exists in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In particular, the Bible presents Jesus of Nazareth as the Son of God in a unique sense. This is a super important point, and our Muslim friends will almost always bring up an objection to the Trinity. Some Christians get intimidated and try to avoid discussing the Trinity because they feel it's too complicated, but it's important to be ready to dig in and study and be ready to answer this objection from the Bible. Honestly, I myself used to try to avoid the Trinity in discussions with Muslims, but now I understand how central it is to the whole message of the gospel. So here are some different ways this objection might be raised in a conversation with our Muslim friends, all these different objections. Let's talk about these. And before we get into answering these specifically, let's look at some reasons why Muslims say these things. The Quran incorrectly implies that Christians believe in three gods. Of course, Christians with Orthodox doctrine do not believe in three gods. We all believe that there's one God who exists in three persons. But this is a common misunderstanding that many Muslims have about Christianity. It's actually based on the Quran. So the Quran says in 573, they do blaspheme who say that Allah is one of three in a trinity, where there is no God except one Allah. Notice that the words in a trinity are not in the original Arabic text. They were just added by some translators in the 20th century. In the translations. And also Surah 4, Ayah 171. Believe therefore in Allah and His apostles, and say not three. Desist, it is better for you. Allah is only one God. Far be it from His glory that He should have a son. Of course, actually, we Christians believe in only one God. Here are just a few Bible verses which clearly teach that there are only one God. I encourage you to look up all of these. Each one is beautiful. The whole 15 chapters from Isaiah 40 through Isaiah 55 has a lot of beautiful sections that talk about God, and it's worth reading in its entirety. Second, the Quran accuses Christians of believing that God took Mary as a wife or consort and had physical sexual relations with her to produce Jesus as a biological son. The Quran says in Surah 5, Ayah 116, when God said, O Jesus, son of Mary, did thou say unto men, take me and my mother as gods apart from God? He said to thee, be it glory, it is not mine to say what I have no right to. And in Surah 6, Ayah 100 through 101, they falsely attribute to him sons and daughters without knowledge. Glory be to him, and highly exalted is he above what they ascribe to him. Wonderful originator of the heavens and earth. How could he have a son when he has no consort or wife? And that son word there is walad. So Christians, of course, do not believe that Mary is part of the divine Trinity, nor that Jesus' sonship is physical or biological. And the Bible teaches that the Son of God existed from eternity and actually created the universe. So he existed long before Mary was even born. It's interesting that the Arabic actually has two words for son, to my knowledge, walad, which refers only to a biological son, and ibn, which could refer either to a son in the biological sense or to a metaphorical sense. And all the Quran verses that argue against being Jesus being the Son of God use that word walad. And Christians would agree that Jesus was not the walad or biological son of God. God did not have a physical relationship with Mary to produce Jesus. But the other Arabic word for son, ibn, is the word used in Arabic Bibles for Jesus, that he is the Son of God in a different sense, not biological. It's important for us to understand, as we discuss the Trinity and Jesus with our Muslim friends, that they may have these misconceptions in their mind about what we're saying, which we do not. We're not saying those things, so we can be ready to dispel the myths and explain what the Bible actually teaches. So, let's just review the concept of the Trinity, the one God who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This is not something invented by Christians. It was rather found in the Bible, and starting with the Jewish Old Testament scriptures, clarified further by Jesus when he came. He talked a lot about his Father and his relationship with his Father, and then clarified even further by Jesus' disciples in the rest of the New Testament as they wrote down Jesus' teachings and reflected on them. Then in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries, Christian theologians began to synthesize and formalize and systematize these teachings into the doctrine of the Trinity that we have today in the creeds and so on. Tertullian coined the word Trinity in 213 AD, but he didn't understand some aspects of the doctrine, and later theologians, such as the ones at the Council of Nicaea, wrote more accurate versions of it. And you can see the supplement for more details. While there are many ways to explain the Trinity to Muslims, I encourage you to stay away from physical analogies like water, ice, and steam, and egg, yolk, and shell, and quarks, and all that stuff. Just stick with the Bible and stay as close to the Bible as you possibly can. This is a really excellent article going through all of the different Bible verses about the Trinity, and there's some others that we can see in this supplement. So there are many places in the Bible to start. Here's one example. Matthew 28. After Jesus rose from the dead, he said, well, the 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had designated. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some were doubtful. And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Notice that Jesus said the name, not the names. That's the one name of the one God who eternally exists in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I think the best way to explain the Trinity to a Muslim is to take plenty of time and slowly and carefully go through all the relevant Bible passages, starting the Old Testament. If you have time for this, this is the best way. For example, the Bible talks about angels, who are spiritual beings created by God, and the word angel means messenger. But there is one special person whom the Bible refers to as the angel of the Lord, or the messenger of the Lord. Not just an angel, but the angel of the Lord. And it's very interesting. There are many sections of the Old Testament that talk about this person. The angel of the Lord is actually referred to as the Lord in some places, and as God. And so many times in the same passage, you'll go back and forth, like in Genesis 22, I think it is, where it refers to him as the angel of the Lord and as the Lord, and so on, back and forth. And there are also many places where God is referred to as being physically seen and heard. When the elders of Israel went up on the Mount Sinai, they saw God, they saw his feet in the cloud. So how is this possible that God could be seen, even though he's a spirit? And so when we get to the New Testament, there's even more clarity that although there's only one God, that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And these are distinct from each other and relate to each other as distinct persons. And yet there's one God. They're not three gods. Here are some great links with lots of verses to look at. And I encourage you to first study these on your own and then be willing to take the time to go through them with your Muslim friend in a slow, patient way, if he or she is willing. Now, let's discuss some objections against the Trinity and how we can answer them. One objection is that the Bible doesn't contain the word Trinity. So it's true. The word Trinity is not in the Bible because Trinity comes from a Latin word, Trinitas, and the Bible was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, not Latin. But the concept is taught. So we can illustrate this to our Muslim friend by asking whether they believe in the concept of Tawheed. And Tawheed is the Arabic word talking about the oneness of God, the unity of God. Then we can ask them, where's the word Tawheed in the Quran? They believe it, but to my knowledge, the word itself is not in the Quran, just the concept is taught. It's the same with Trinity. The concept of the Trinity is taught in many places, and we can invite our friend to study with us some of the many Bible passages, perhaps over coffee or a meal together. Another objection is, it doesn't make sense that God could have a son. How could he have a son when he has no wife? This objection comes straight from the Quran, as we previously mentioned, such as Surah 6, Ayah 101, and other places. We can reply that we Christians do not believe that Jesus is the physical Son of God from physical relationships between God and Mary. Instead, consider other meanings of the word son. Jesus is the Son of God in other ways. Even the Quran uses the word son in this way. So, for example, Surah 8, Ayah 41 talks about the traveler. And he uses this Arabic word, Ibn Sabil, which literally means son of the road. And, that makes sense. A person spends a lot of time on the road, they're a son of the road. We can ask our friend, does this mean that the road had a wife? Physically procreated the traveler? Of course not. The term son of can mean a close but non-physical relationship. So this great article goes through many of the metaphorical and non-physical uses of the word son in the Bible, in the Old Testament and New Testament. It's really amazing how often this word is used in metaphorical ways. And then it shows how Jesus' sonship applies in many ways. Very deep metaphors. I mean, there's a connection there that's profound. So I'd encourage you to read this article. Another objection that you might hear is that the doctrine of the Trinity doesn't make any sense, and sometimes they'll point to a math equation. They'll say, how could 1 + 1 + 1 equal 1? Doesn't make sense. Well, depending on the situation, if they're insisting on a math equation, how about we could point to God's infinite greatness and suggest instead this equation: infinity plus infinity plus infinity equals infinity. But of course, God is much greater than we are, so we don't have to try to reduce him down to a simple math equation. And we shouldn't be surprised if his majestic personhood is more complicated than our own small, creaturely personhood. Really, if we're going to know anything about this majestic, infinite God, we must rely on what he has already revealed to us about himself in the Bible. So we can bring it back to the Bible again, encourage them, and invite them to read it with us. What does the Bible say about God?